they're just using it as well, it's this guy's fault. It's not my fault. I looked at the data. I used the constraints. This guy should have figured it out. We gave him the external cueing, where it's like, no, this is all just excuses as to why you put a bad plan in place.
All right, this is More Than Velocity. I'm Bart Pear here with Ryan Croton and Jordan Oseguera, and today we're going to talk about coaching. Both Ryan and Jordan have done coaching in lots of different aspects, but more importantly, they've also been around a lot of different coaching and a lot of different aspects and seen what works and what doesn't. And today we're going to talk about their take on that over their years of experience. What makes a good coach? What are some bad traits? And you know what? I'm going to let Jordan kick off this one. Just start with your experience and you as a coach and what you've learned.
Well, I've been really lucky to have some really good coaches in my time. And what I've noticed is the coaches that are the most impactful are the ones that care about you more than they care about their notoriety. It's about your progress. It's not about them being right. They're willing to admit when they're wrong, and they're willing to put things in place that really prioritize the player. And that's what coaching is it's the act of selflessness. It's about placing your needs below the needs of what the team or the player is going to need. Give a little background is, the first major coach that I had in my life was, when I was little league playing travel ball. His name was Troy Davis, and he had a brother, Kelly Davis. They both played at the University of Utah. Fantastic people, fantastic human beings, and the way we got connected with them, they ran a business next to my parents' business, and his kid played baseball. They started a travel team just to make sure their kid had a good atmosphere, and that was kind of my first intro to seeing selflessness when it came to coaching. From that, in between there, you have some good coaches and bad coaches, but then I was able to play in high school under a guy named Steve Cramblett. Military background. I believe he was in the Army, but he's an ABCA Hall of Fame coach. Fantastic guy again. And then, when he left, he had some health issues. But from there, I was able to have some other coaches, some good, some bad. Then I had some really bad coaches in other areas. But then I was able to play under another ABCA Hall of Fame coach. His name was Skip Walker at College of Southern Idaho. And he was, again, great guy. I had him as well as his son. But Skip Walker was a huge impact. I've never met anyone who has bad stories to say about Skip Walker. But again, it was because he put things in the context of how do we benefit you, the player? Even if you're me, who's not going to impact the team at the end of the day, he made sure that I was getting what I needed to done on a regular basis. And then I was really lucky to, mentor. They have awards named after the guy, the Tom House, Pitching Coach of the Year award. And, Bart, you've been able to meet him, and you just see the way he can take humor and take a tense situation and turn it into something where like, hey, now we're all on the same page. And he's a guy who can read the room. I've met very few players that disliked working with Tom. And granted, I've known him since I was a little kid, but everything's always been, hey, how do we make you improve today? Whether that's from, the coaching standpoint of it when I was working with him, learning how to be a coach, as well as when I was a player, how do we make you a better player today? So it's those guys that look at things, and I won't use the name who said it about Tom, but what was most impactful is they said, you'll be walking down the street, you'll see a dog turd on the sidewalk, and you'll try to find a way to make that dog turd a better dog turd. So it's just those guys want to help people. They want to make them better, even if they're dog turds at the end of the day. And for me, that's one of the most impactful things that you can see from a coach.
Very cool. Yeah, Tom impressed me. He just seemed, he's in his 70s. And he's still very long-term focused. Like he's thinking about the impact next 10, 15 years. He's not thinking about the impact the next month or season or whatever. It's pretty impressive.
In terms of my experience, and for many of us, our first coaching experience usually comes from a parent. And unfortunately, both my mother and my father had no ability in baseball. My mom can hit a little bit. She would play with us in the father-son games. She would actually be my my teammate. She can hit a little bit, but there was no real playing catch that much in my house. So when I first started baseball, I was about 8 years old, and my best friend's father was my coach. And, I just saw a lot of characteristics in this coach as being, a father figure as well, but he really instilled passion in all of the kids. So, for instance, every time that you came to a practice or a game, you got a pack of baseball cards. He bought baseball cards for all these kids, like packages, and every single game there was a pack of baseball cards. And most of the kids would open up these baseball cards for the gum. They want to chew that stale piece of cruddy gum that comes in these packages. But I would look at these cards, and I remember the first package he gave me, I looked at these cards and I saw all these players, and I didn't really understand it, what the backs meant and the stats. And I remember going up to him and I said, do these guys, is this their job? Do they play baseball for their job? And he said to me, yes. And he said, you can do it too, and just real quick, like it was just a very quick exchange, but I felt so much confidence, and I started to have, this idea of wanting to be a Major League Baseball player from a very young age. And I remember coming home and showing my mom the cards, and my mom wanted, she wanted me to be a doctor from the time I was born. Most of the family members that we have in my family, they're in the medical field. And so my mom jokes about it. She's like, couldn't there have been a team orthopedic surgeon in the pack? you know but this particular man just really believed in me. And I carry an award that he gave me. I got the most improved player. It was in 1987. I'm not going to really give my age, but a long time ago. And it goes with me wherever I go, because it was a symbol to me that someone believed in me, someone thought that I was good enough, and that I um, have abilities to succeed, and to see that potential. And I think when you deal with any of your athletes, I think it's important to build them up as much as possible. There's some coaches, like I had a college coach. He's still in the game. I can't believe it. But his whole method was, let's try to tear down players. Let's try to make them on edge. I think his whole psychology of coaching was, can I get them to band together with fear? And for me, like my experience, I wasn't a hockey player, and I'm Canadian, and most hockey players, their coaches are really rough, on the kids. And I wasn't used to that. My coaching background came from this love. You're going to be great. I believe in you. You can do everything you want to set out for in the game. Just got to work hard enough. To now this other juxtaposed coach, who I remember hitting in the batting cage. He was talking about my parents, how weak they were as parents, and using some figurative language. But to produce a son that can't get through 7 pitches and perform all the rounds appropriately. Like I think I popped a couple up in the top of the cage that was over top of me, the big boy. But it was just so night and day that it was shocking for me to experience that. And I think, for a good coach, you have to read the player. But I always say, the impression I got from the time I was 7 years old from this coach, from this man, is that, you know, allow that player to see that you believe in them, that you see their potential, constantly. And the other thing that he would do in his coaching point, it was great. Like, he would sandwich the communication, which I think is important for coaches. And a lot of coaches don't do this. Like, start with the good, then give the negative, the improvement, and then end with a positive. He would always sandwich the communication so that you always went in, you got the positive reinforcement, you knew what you needed to change, and you felt good afterwards. You didn't feel like you were failing at something, and it was a learning process. So that, that was my experience, early experience from this guy that I still talk to today. And it's led me to my own coaching vision from that moment.
Well, I think that's very individual too, with the way you want to communicate to the players, because if you're managing a roster, there's some people that you're talking about the sandwich method. Some guys need that, where other guys just need you to tell them straightforward, hey, this is bad. We need to improve this, and that's what they need to hear. So a lot of that's individual as well. And that's where it comes to, like, there's this term in baseball everyone uses. Oh, you got to have feel. You got to have feel.
Yeah.
You'll get some feel. You'll get some feel. But the guys who talk about feel have the least amount of it. Has been my experience. And we had one of the guys, just because he's still employed with some of the teams, is we had a conversation. He goes, all these coaches keep talking about feel and how the players need to have feel, and every other coach needs feel. He goes, these guys have no feel because they keep coming in and asking me to do stuff, and I don't have time to do it. He's like, feel out the situation because I'm way more busy than any of you guys, and you keep asking me to do things you should be doing. So feel is this term that everyone likes to throw around, but you need to have that personal relationship with the players, and that's what really good coaches do, is they get to know you first before they start saying, hey, here's your compliment sandwich or your criticism, whatever you want to call that thing, I don't know. Or, there's guys that, I still work with that I've known for 7-8 years that, hey, dude, your slider sucks. What's the deal? And that's the way you get through to those guys. And then there's other guys that go, hey, I noticed you're regressing here a little bit. Here's my thought. What do you want to get going? And you got to be a little more calm with them, a little more kind. But you once you know the person and you learn how that guy responds to things, that's when you can really make those breakthroughs. And just like, me and you, Ryan, like, with me and you personally can be really honest with each other to where, we'll get in arguments, but we don't hurt each other's feelings. And that's important because we have that trust. We know each other. We've been to dinner together. We've worked out together, and even in the program, we've showered together, like there's a lot of things that have happened that we've done together that it's like, we have a very good friendship, a good bond to where we know it's not a personal attack. But there's other guys that we don't know as well that, once we first got to know Bart, we got to kind of understand, like, what kind of humor is he going to react to? Can I be really sarcastic with Bart, or do I need to be more straightforward with him? So you learn the learner, and you understand how they respond to that feedback best. You have a couple kids, Ryan. Your oldest kid is going to respond differently than your youngest kid to a specific way, and that's what really good coaches do, is they understand how that person digests information, and they try to make it work for them. And there's going to be times where, the nice way to approach things isn't going to work. You have to be stern. You have to be a little more aggressive. But then there's also times that being stern and aggressive only creates a bigger divide, and that doesn't work. And, I don't know who this coach was, Wink, that you're talking about, but when it comes down to it, those guys are good every 1 to 6 years. They're not good every single stinking year, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. It's those that can communicate at the individual level that are good every single year. And that's why there's some universities you see, man, those guys, that was coach of the year in 2016, but they haven't even been to the postseason in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. What's the deal? He's a crappy communicator. That's what the deal is. He's not taking responsibility on himself. He's passing that buck onto the players, saying, well, your parents are a disgrace. That's why you suck. Well, no. Like, that's a strange way to communicate that you want this guy to train a little harder. So that might work for 5% of the players out there, but you need to find what works for each individual and communicate that appropriately. And there's not a one-size-fits-all form of communication, and that changes year to year when it comes to talking with groups. And, I've had a really good opportunity, like I said, to work under some guys that are really good. And I had a guy who actually worked in a SEAL platoon. He was one of the first groups of Navy SEALs. And the amount of communication skills that I learned from him is something that I'll take with me for the rest of my life, because it's life or death in those scenarios where when you're working with a player, it's not life or death that someone's going to die, but you're going to have an impact on that guy, positive or negative. And if I'm going to break this guy down because I'm going to get what I want out of it, that's not a long-term focus. That's a very short-term, I'm going to win once every 6 years, as opposed to I'm going to win every single day.
I think it's interesting, like when you talked about, my kids, and my mind went to a conversation that I had with my wife recently. And I make the cardinal sin sometimes with my kids, and my wife reminds me. So the word that coaches should never use, and I don't think parents should use it either, is the word don't. Like with my son Cameron, don't put that in your mouth. Or Casey don't put that on the table. It, it became instinctive for me with my kids that I never used with athletes. I never wanted to lead them into thinking what they shouldn't be doing rather than communicating what they should. So the word choice is pretty powerful. And I always think about that with coaches is, talking even in pro ball, it's tough because you're constantly looking for problems in players as a coach. What can't they do? What are they not good at? What is their deficiencies? What do I have to work on? And I always see, sometimes coaches get frustrated and they say, this guy can't do it. He can't make the adjustment, And I always think, like, are they using language that isn't working? Because I feel like if you're not seeing an effective improvement with your athlete when you notice that they need to make a change, you need to kind of sit back and think about, how am I talking to them? What words am I using? What mental models am I using? Am I giving them enough drills so that they can feel what I'm talking about without me having to speak so much? And I just feel too that coaches can sometimes throw in the towel on an athlete, where that the really great coach, they take a moment, they process and say, okay, I need to pivot. This brings me into another topic of conversation Jordan and I get into all the time. What's the definition of a good coach, at least at the pro level? The definition of a good coach at the pro level, they have to have a sense of urgency. The best coaches in the game, they take the least amount of time to make a positive change. And I remember us in professional baseball, we couldn't define it. Some coaches said, oh no, this could take a year for the player to be able to make this particular adjustment in their movement pattern. Or to be able to hone this particular pitch. And for me, and I'm sure Jordan agrees, that's not good enough. That's a player's career. Like, if you're going to take a year to wait on a player to see if they actually get a concept that can help them promote themselves in the sport, you're doing the player a disservice. We all as coaches need to have a sense of urgency. If you're a private coach, hey, they're paying you, they're paying you just like an organization's paying you. You need to get the most and the best out of that athlete as soon as possible. So you have to be able to have in your mind an opportunity to pivot. You have to talk to that athlete about that too. And I don't think a lot of coaches do, because they sometimes lack that humility to say, I was wrong. I wanted you to change, your stride angle, and I was wrong. It really affected your pitch qualities. And, we need to get you back there, and we need to do some other things to enhance that. And coaches just have to have the ability to be able to be a resource, rather than a domineering voice, and that happens in pro ball. Nobody calls you coach in pro ball. Coach Croton. College, that's a college thing. They call you coach. In pro ball, they call you by your name or your nickname, and you are there as a consultant to their performance. And you have to be able to, as a consultant, give them advice, and you have to be able to let them know that not always you're going to get it right, but you're going to work around until you find the right pathway for them to experience success.
So, and you guys don't have to name names. Let's talk about some bad. Let's talk about the ugly. We talked a little about the good. Let's talk about the bad and the ugly you guys have seen. I'm sure there's some horror stories out there.
Just to kind of piggyback on something Ryan said about, there was instances where a coach has said, this could take 12 months, 18 months, 2 years before we see a result in this player. Well, that's not development. That's just called letting time run its course, in the sense. Development, it's like if you go to the auto mechanic to get your tire fixed or to rotate your tires, or something's wrong with your engine, and they say, yeah, this could take up to 24 months to get your car back to optimal performance. Who's paying that guy? I'm not paying money for that. Nobody's paying money for that. Like, if that's the business model, that doesn't work in the real world. It only works I don't know where that works actually. But that's just one of those things where you're putting the blame on the player as opposed to going, hey, you know what? I made a decision that wasn't right. We need to pivot. We need to change what's going on here. That's how you become. Just how you become better is you need to understand what you did well, what you did poorly, and how do you limit those. How do you learn what not to do is the big thing. Everyone thinks they know what to do, when in reality, I don't think it's as big of a window as we think it is. But that's one of the things I've seen on the bad end is, guys saying that it should take this amount of time to make this change, and it's more what I've noticed is it's because people are going, I don't know exactly what to do. I'm just giving advice to give advice and hoping for the best. I'm going to throw a whole bunch of stuff on the wall. We're going to see what sticks. Maybe everything falls off and this player's career is ruined, or maybe he gets a surgery. Or maybe he ends up getting the yips, and we put so much on this guy's plate that now he can't perform. And they're just using it as it's this guy's fault. It's not my fault. I looked at the data. I used the constraints. This guy should have figured it out. We gave him the external cueing, where it's like, no, this is all just excuses as to why you put a bad plan in place. There's no other industry that is okay with, like, what is the percentage? We're putting out these. We're doing the research on the draft. What is the percentage of players that are getting to the big leagues, Ryan?
Yeah, so it really starts to fall after the first round. So in 2005 to 2015 that we analyzed, only 71% of first rounders made the major leagues. I think it was like 52% of second rounders, and then it really starts to drop down. So,
So if
those
you're,
two
let's just say
rounds.
everything stays the same, 2 draft picks out of your 20, because now it's 20 draft picks, makes it to the major leagues. Where is that a successful business? If 2 out of 20, people you talk to with crossover wanted to use crossover, that's not successful. You need a higher turnover rate than that. And too often, most the bad coaches are going, it's the player's fault. Couldn't mentally handle it. He was soft. His parents raised him wrong. It's like, if it's the parents that are raising him, he's spending 16 hours a day with you. So how are his parents factoring into this? You know what I mean? We're getting these guys when they're 16, when they're impressionable. Maybe it's not the parents' fault as to why this kid couldn't handle the stresses of professional baseball. Maybe we need to take a little more ownership on this. He just wasn't willing to put in the work. Now, he wasn't willing to put in the work you asked him to do because it was communicated poorly. So it's, everyone's wanting to get to the big leagues. There's not a player in professional baseball that you ask that says, I don't care about doing that. There's not a coach you talk to that doesn't want to help. But when it comes down to it, there's the ownership and the responsibility of saying, I will take accountability for the plan that I put in place. And, one of the things I loved with me personally is the assistant GM and the general manager. When they would send me a guy to work with in Arizona, hey, we're signing this free agent. He just got released by this team. What do you want to do with him? Well, this is what I'd like to improve. And the next question, how long is that going to take? And they would put time constraints on me. Hey, if it's going to take 6 weeks, we don't have time for that. We need a win today. This better get done in 2 weeks. Okay, sounds good. Let's make this happen quicker. And it really forces you to start pivoting and adjusting and finding what's going to work as quickly as you can.
I mean, getting on the bad traits, at least in my particular avenue, I would sometimes sit in on the training room. My position was really interesting in baseball. As the director of performance integration, I was kind of in the middle of everything and able to be on the field with coaches, be in the weight room, obviously, with strength coaches that I directed most often, and working with the clinical staff. And I remember one particular clinician talking to an athlete who, would go to the weight room. He's very body conscious. Things have to feel right, and I remember him communicating to him that he was tight. He would just say, oh man, you're really tight. You're really tight in your shoulder. You need to get a little bit more upward rotation of your shoulder blade. And that communication like triggered this athlete into basically overstretching himself into greater injury risk. Like perennial arm injuries, and you could tell like he was always fidgeting. He would never leave the weight room because he was constantly working on something that we had told him isn't functioning right. Without looking at performance, but we were on the health side of this athlete, where our communication, like having not understanding the athlete, is not a good thing. We definitely need to be able to do that. I think a good coach relates well. I've had the fortunate opportunity to work for 3 major league managers, all brilliant, very brilliant. You want to talk about a PhD in baseball, it's like beyond that. That's like an emeritus PhD in baseball. All brilliant baseball minds. But only one, and they were all roughly, the same age, and only one really could relate to the athletes, stayed relevant, understood their music, you know, calls them on Christmas and Thanksgiving. You know, the coaches, the managers, the people that are out there that cut off the tie with the athlete after the season, to me, that's a bad coach. Quite honestly, it shows me that you don't care enough about your players as people, and you worry more about what they can do for you in your win and loss record. And that doesn't sit well with me. Even though I'm no longer with the Angels, I constantly text back and forth with players. Even my experience with other major league teams, I stay in communication with those guys. And why? Because they made a great impression on my life, and they feel like an extension of family. At times, you want to see them do well, even though they play for other teams. I want to see them be successful because I work so hard with them, and they work so hard with me. And the relationship was very real. And I think coaches, they remove themselves from the human aspect. That makes a bad coach, in my opinion, is when you don't treat your athletes, and it happens sometimes at the pro level, as people. You're looking them as numerical values. And as far as sports science, some sports scientists, they don't even get to know their players at all. They're locked in a room with a computer, and they're looking at red and green values that they may have coded in their programs to be able to detect when an athlete is in or out of a range. They don't even know the player, and that's not a good recipe for success. So that's kind of, in my opinion, one of the number one things is, treat them as people. Know them, know that what you could say could either build them up or could damage them. And coaches that don't do that have a problem. There's a guy in the industry. His name is Brett Bartholomew. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this guy, but he makes a living on coaching relationships, leadership relationships, and how to interact with players. He's written a book called Conscious Coaching. I recommend coaches to read it. But it all talks about how to get the essential information out of a player and how to create buy-in. And that's what you need to do. You have to build trust, and you have to show them you care.
Yeah, on that, I've had, man, especially when I was coaching in college, people would say, well, how do you know if you had a good, one of the questions I had in some interviews, how do you know if you had a successful season? How do you judge, success and failure? And it probably cost me a lot of jobs, obviously. Got me over here with arm care at some point, was saying you don't know if you had success or failure till 15 or 20 years down the road. And well, what does that mean? Is it if you're getting invited to weddings, if you're getting informed when someone has a loss in their family, or you're being told about their kids being born, and you've made that relationship not just on an athletic sense, but on a personal sense, that's how you know you're getting buy-in, you're getting trust. And that's what coaching is, a lot of people think coaching is this, militaristic, I'm going to yell at you and you're going to do what I tell you to do because I'm the coach and I know what's best. That's not what it is you're building a culture. You're building an organization. You're building a team that doesn't just have success on the field but off the field. And that's what a good coach does, is he can look you in the eye. He can be honest enough in a sense. He can be harsh enough when he needs to, but he can be kind enough when he needs to as well, knowing where that player is on that day. And to go back to earlier is, there's days that Ryan needs a little more of the, bring him along because maybe he's had a rough day. We don't know. Maybe he got in an argument, road rage. Hey, I'm sorry about that going on in Canada. Someone cut him off because they're driving on the wrong side of the road or whatever's going on. Arizona, wrong way drivers, they warn you about that stuff. That could be the tipping point for him to where you can't be harsh with him that day. You got to read the situation, understand your player's body language, know where they're at, and meet them where they're at on the day. And that's how you get that buy-in. And, that's one of the great things I learned from Brett Bartholomew is we were able to have a conversation with him and talk with him. And he put us in this, atmosphere where I'm supposed to be explaining, like, I forget what it was, to one of our strength coaches. But
A
television, that's right. A television to our
from
strength coach.
One guy.
Well, I was from modern day. He was from prehistoric.
Yeah.
And one of the things was like I was saying, you can see this and see this and see this, and the guy was going like, don't understand that. So you had to find different words to explain the same thing. And that's what most people don't understand is like, I've seen it so many times in pro ball where someone comes over to a player who doesn't speak English. They go, hey, PFP at 7:10. Huh? And they just say it louder. It's like he doesn't speak the language. Saying it louder is just making him more confused on what's going on. Like it's not the same language. You need to find a different way to get him to understand this. And that's what's great about it. It's like, yeah, you might only have 3 drills, but you need 1,000 ways to teach those 3 drills. And we can get into internal cueing, external cueing, and all this stuff is great. But unless you can communicate that, you're not going to get a player to care if it's an internal or external cue. And for me right now, there's a lot of coaching out there that's focusing on the theory of coaching, but not the actual practical application of communication of coaching.
So let's flip this around. If I'm a parent or a player, high school, and I'm looking at colleges or even travel ball teams or whatever, how am I trying to identify the good coaches? Is there a culture I'm looking for? What am I doing to make sure?
Oh man, this is right up my alley. I don't mean to cut you off, Bart, but the most important thing, the persona that some coaches may put on in front of the parent could be much different in front of the athlete when they're not there. And I think what's essential for young athletes when they're deciding upon a school and a coach is to actually see if they can communicate with a player. So sometimes in the recruiting visit, they get an opportunity to be around players and they get to communicate, and they need to understand and ask quite candidly, what's this coach like? Is he really tough to communicate with? Does he keep his door open? How does he treat freshmen? How does he treat a redshirt player? Ask how
you
he
want to know
treats
the best way to get that question answered? Go look at the stats, find out who has the least amount of playing time.
Yeah.
Message him on Instagram.
Yeah.
Find out what their thought
That's what I was
is.
saying. Like, how do you
go to the guy who doesn't get played or who has the worst numbers? He's got a 3,000 ERA in 1/3 of an inning. The guy who's got the crustiest look on his face in the team photo. Go find that guy and see what he has to say about the coach, and then find out what the other guy has to say who's got the most innings. Somewhere in the middle there is going to be the truth.
Yep. I tell you, I mean, I was so fortunate on my recruiting visit, and I'll name the guy. He's amazing. His name's Greg Hamilton. He's the director of Baseball Canada. I still talk to him this day. He recruited me, and he came to my house. My mom invited him, and he was in our home talking about the school where I attended. He was a pitching coach, and I just thought it was amazing the way he talked about his outlook and how he coaches, and the things he would see in me as a player. They weren't sure if I was going to be an outfielder or an infielder, but they knew I could hit. He was just big on having a great experience in college, and he said to my family and myself that it's important for him as a coach, because here I am, I'm in Canada, I'm going all the way north to the University of Maine, where, I don't know anybody at all. And it's in the U.S., which is great to play baseball, and there's scholarship money coming. But he just sat down and he said, I want your son to have the best of everything. And Jordan's talked about it before, and having three things is, the right social atmosphere, the right athletic development, the right academic climate. And he had just said, I want to make sure that your son has all of those things, and I will put myself on the line for that, to enjoy it. And he came there, and within 2 weeks he had to pull me in his office. He's like, "Hey man, I'm really sorry. Um, I just have been named the director of Baseball Canada, and I have to take the job." And it was hard for me because, there again, you felt that connection. I went back to this coach that I've been talking to when I was 7, 8 years old, that really believed in me, really excited, and that's just me as an athlete. That's what I needed. I felt on some form love, um, from this guy, and he is just, yeah, awesome.
All right. What are your take, Jordan? What would you be telling? I mean, I love the idea of reaching out um, on Instagram to the players. I think that makes a lot of sense. Any other tells? Any other things you'd be looking for?
Man, I think the best way to get information is just do what you can to get inside sources, and the one of the most important things that you're never as good as you think you are, but you're never as bad as the media says as well. So like I said, somewhere in the middle is where that's going to land. So one of the worst ways I think that you can evaluate a coach is by talking to other coaches, because those coaches are always going to project what they think should be happening onto someone else. So that's why it's, if someone called me for a recommendation on someone that I worked with on how they would be, it's never what you think it is. They're never as good of a coach as you think another coach is, and they're never as bad of a coach as you think they are. It's somewhere in the middle, because you're projecting a lot of what you see in yourself onto someone else. I would do it different that way, or that they're no good on this. So a lot of it is, when you evaluate from coaches, especially in a pro atmosphere or especially in a college atmosphere, you're going to run into these cliques of, well, I want that guy's job. So when someone asks me to evaluate them, I'm going to make me sound better than he is because I know what I want, as opposed to just being honest about it and realizing, hey, we're all pulling on the same rope here. We're trying to get going in the same direction. And that's one of the big issues that happens. The bigger an organization gets, the more misinformation starts, flowing around all over the place. So for me, the best evaluation is the people who are being coached by that coach. You want to, who you evaluate good mechanics. It's not other mechanics. It's the people who are getting their cars fixed by that mechanic. That's who's writing the reviews. You're going to find out a lot if a guy's a good chef by going and eating his food and then reviewing that food. And it's the same for a coach. You go in there, you can take feedback from other coaches. They might have some great tips, but they're not the litmus test of whether you're a good coach or not. The players are the litmus test for that.
I wanted to add one more thing. I had a really interesting collegiate experience because I was at the Division I level, and then I also played at the Division II level. And I think too, parents also, obviously you're talking about communicating with the players that aren't getting a lot of playing time, or the redshirt players see his experience, but it's also great to communicate with the team captain. And if you can have access to that player, because they'll give you an insight in terms of the culture of that program, and how, the values that the coach may be instilling on the team through this player. And I remember going to the Division II level. It was night and day with my coaches. That he was so empowering, that to the point, like, if you're a hitter, there would be a lot of times where he wouldn't put signs on, not trying to control my game, allow me to have freedom with a 3-0 count to swing. Like, he wanted that with everybody. He felt like, he wanted the players to be leaders, and his whole thing was like, anybody can be a hero. That was the whole mentality of our team. And we were in a small middle of nowhere in West Virginia. There was nobody there. His name's Rich Leach. He's just a great guy. His son actually was drafted, so he's just a great baseball mind. And and his whole thing was just, anybody could be the hero. That was the motto. and not only did we have confidence, I mean, his practices, he ran the conditioning sessions. They were really hard, but there was this overcome these challenges, and built such strong character that I would be able to tell. Now, I didn't have that experience as a captain on the team to communicate with incoming athletes or athletes interested in the team. At that time, nobody really contacted me, but I would have told them, you're going to have just a great sense of pride, and you are going to feel like you've accomplished something because of the challenges that you are placed upon in practice. The other things weren't great at the Division II level. I'm sure, Jordan, you probably have done this, but you're grooming your own field. You did a lot of things that
It's called
you don't.
character building.
Yeah,
Those
yeah, character
calluses on your
building.
hand are good.
Yeah. You never do that at Division I level. There's always the field crew, and you go out there and you're not doing your laundry, ever. But we're at a small school, so you're right. There are a lot of character building experiences. So, as a parent,
Yeah,
see if you can see the two spectrums. The captain of the team, and the guy who's on the red shirt. He's not getting a lot of playing time, and he's there. And how well is he being coached? Like, if my son doesn't get a chance to play right away, is he getting coached really well? And if my son gets a chance to be that team captain, what are the values that are being instilled upon this captain to dispel to the team? Because the culture is huge.
yeah, and that's you get a good litmus test on that too by talking to as many people in a program as you can, and you're going to find the commonalities. And when I was coaching over at Vanguard, we had a guy. For those of the guys who don't know what Vanguard is, it's pretty much the Ivy League of the West Coast. It's hands down one of the greatest universities and institutions known to man. I went there, so why wouldn't it be fantastic? But we had an assistant coach who I learned a ton from him. I was a pitching coach. He handled the outfielders. His name was Ted Brown. He's passed away now. He had a heart attack the year we went to the World Series, and it was one of those things that was like a unifying thing. It's weird to say that losing someone unified an entire group, but that shows you the impact that one coach can have, because that guy was so big on the same thing. Who's going to be the hero today? Who's going to be the hero today? And he was so big on just bringing everyone together in that culture that it drove players nuts, because he was so big on building that culture that I would be sitting there eating with the pitchers, eating with whoever it might be in the cafeteria, but he'd be grabbing chairs, pulling guys together. Hey, you, come on, you're sitting with your girlfriend. That's great. Come on, we're eating dinner over here together. Come on. And he instilled this family atmosphere at this small school, to where that group of guys, because of what he did, to not only let people know hey, you can be the hero today, but go out of your way and make sure that redshirt freshman is eating with you. Make sure that guy who's only going to pitch when we're down by 10 is eating with you. It's almost like, a lot of the really good NFL quarterbacks, they're the leaders on the team. They're making sure that the backup quarterback knows the plays. They're making sure the backup quarterback understands what's going on, because they want to win. Even if it doesn't involve them all the time, they want to win. And that's what good leadership is they're making sure the guy below them knows the job. And one thing that Ted Brown did a fantastic job of was he made sure that every player knew the job of the guy ahead of them, and that every single guy ahead of that player was teaching them the job below them. And I learned a ton from him. Obviously, like I said, he's not with us anymore, but fantastic of just building that culture. And, when you walked onto that campus and you saw what was going on there, Ted Brown paved a lot of that way for those guys to keep that culture and that atmosphere going on still. And, I know we're the Ivy League of the West Coast, and they keep pumping out those great results when it comes down to it. One win away from going back to the World Series. It's all culture building. We had a first guy debut from the big leagues of that in Jose Rojas, and Sean Isaac got the AAA, Brandon Sandoval AA. A couple guys pitching in high A and things like that from the 5 years that we were all there. And it all comes down to culture. It's not because a Division II player is more or less capable than a Division I player. It's because the culture that got built because of the coaches in a leadership role.
Yeah, you make a great point too. Like, parents are like, does my kid go D1? Does he go D2, D3, NAIA, junior college? Hey, for professional baseball, you just have to stand out. That's the key. It doesn't matter where you go. you have to stand out as a player. You have to perform really well. And most of the time, you're going to get invited to draft camps when you stand out, and you're going to get a very close look by the scouts there. I've been to many draft camps, and you're finding kids that are at a Division III junior college that are really good athletes, and it really it doesn't matter when you see some of these raw skills to get to the next level. And I know we talk a lot about sport performance, but the academic side is really important. These kids, they have to do well academically. As much as we love baseball, you cannot play it forever. And the parents listening and the players that could be listening to this, you got to make your academics a priority when you go to college, because one day the game's going to end and you have to figure out what to do with your life. And sometimes people don't want to go back to school when they're 29 or 30 years old.
Unless you're Ryan and you're still working on your 9th PhD for some reason.
Yeah, I love school, but it's not for everybody. So get the most you can out of your college experience, and you leave in your junior year. There's a player, Eric Detmers, Reed Detmers, sorry. I know an Eric Detmers, but Reed just got called up by the Los Angeles Angels on Sunday. And I remember at this COVID shortened season that we had, I'd ask him, hey, what are you doing for fun after, because all these guys are locked up in their hotel room. And he looked at me and said, I'm studying, man. I made a pact with my parents that I'm going to graduate. So after I leave here, I'm cracking the books open and I'm studying until I got to go to bed. And that's the kind of athlete you can be, and getting the most out of your college experience, and getting getting your education under your belt, because that's really important for your future. For the players that are listening here.
Cool. All right. Well, here's to all the coaches out there that were decent, that made a good impact, and I think it's a good podcast. And thanks for listening. And until next time, see ya.